growing up as a child, my dad used to tell me that Grandpa invented the fortune cookie, and me and my siblings, we all thought, Dad was just kind of telling stories, because we grew up thinking that it was Chinese also, because the only time we really saw fortune cookies a lot were in Chinatown, in the Chinese restaurant. If you look at the outside of a fortune cookie, the actual outside is what I grew up knowing as a Japanese sweet cracker. And these molds are the ones that are used to make them. And they're just round. Not necessarily, they're not folded. They're usually served with little sesame seeds on top. But that's exactly the same material that's used as for the fortune cookie. So looking back, then I realized, yeah, maybe it could possibly be Grandpa that did this. But the story that my father's always told me is that Grandpa actually used to make the crackers with Japanese calligraphy, we call it kanji, Japanese writing, which the Chinese can also read, but they just pronounce it differently. And so that he would sell them to Chinatown. And at those times, it was a haiku poem. Haiku poems are kind of like proverbs or something similar to that. And it wasn't until the 1920s that the Chinese actually put an English fortune inside of them. And that's when it became more well known as the fortune cookie. In 2003, when we're celebrating our 100th anniversary, just prior to the anniversary, we got a letter from the Historical Society in Boston. I'm sorry, the Chinese Historical Society in Boston. They found a magazine article that was written. It was interviewing a Chinese American that was the first mass producer of the fortune cookie. And the interview took place back in the 1920s, late 1920s. And he was quoted, they asked him, where did the idea of the fortune cookie come from? And in the story, he says that he smiles and laughs and giggles and says, yeah, it was actually invented by a Japanese American in Los Angeles. And they tracked down the beginnings of the fortune cookie to our store. And so they wanted to see pictures of our equipment and things like that. And I had to tell them that because of the World War II, everything was left behind or trashed because none of the equipment could be taken to the evacuation camps that the Japanese were put into. My grandparents and my father and my mother actually got married in camp. They spent 4 years in a camp in Heart Mountain, Wyoming. So when the war was over, they were allowed to come back out. And that, after 4 years, none of that equipment was ever reclaimed or refound. Some businesses were fortunate enough to have people keep it for them, but my grandparents, no, they didn't have that opportunity. They basically had to sell everything they possibly could within 2 weeks and then get out of here.